You need to know today that you might have some weaknesses, but God still wants to work in your life. You're gonna have to learn that, yeah, you have some deficiencies, but none of those deficiencies are gonna delay the destiny that God has planned for you from the very beginning. Am I preaching to anybody today? And every one of us in this room and all of us watching online today, we have some sort of weakness. You might be weak, but God still wants to work in and through your life. You are on the journey of becoming. It's in your brokenness that His glory and power shines through. And some of the weaknesses in your life, you didn't cause them, you didn't ask for it, but God's gonna use it. Quit rehearsing all that you're not and start focusing all that I am. Newsflash, Jesus doesn't need your strength. He needs your surrender. Be you, run your race. God has grace for your space. Work my weakness, God.
That was good.
That was real good.
Very good. Very good. Okay, Pastor Rich, so coming out of that, I think we asked you the same thing last time that you were here with us. Always feel like there's more inside of preachers than they're able to deliver in a certain amount of time. So what's that next point or extra 5 minutes that you would be like, you know what, if I had 5 more minutes, or when I walked off stage, there was like that thing that I was like, oh, I meant to say that in there. Did you have one of those moments this past week?
I think as preachers, we always kind of have those moments. By the way, that recap, there's the sermon right there. I don't know how you guys do that. That blessed me just now.
That's great.
I think the thing that I would add on was probably just the remainder of that little chunk of scriptures, which is what I kind of read to begin with. And I sort of found myself in the middle of it. I kind of left out the very beginning of his context, and I sort of left out his end. In his beginning, he says, you know, hey, if I were to boast, I wouldn't be lying, you know, like essentially he's trying to say, that's the truth. Like he's done some pretty amazing things for the gospel. And he says, I could just tell you about all these, you know, great surpassing revelations or visions I've been having. And I think it's important that we note that on the journey of us becoming and growing and gaining success or getting more skills or being used by God, with great vision always comes great opposition, you know? So there's always going to be, I think there's going to be more resistance the more and more we grow. And then I think on the back end of that text, if we can remember, he genuinely starts kind of boasting in insults, in hardships, in persecutions. Wow. And I think that's probably a little bit of a better close, which is going, so now as I've learned this lesson about working my weakness, really what you're going to hear me talking more and more about as I grow and as God uses me is I'm just going to become more and more open in celebrating all of this opposition and rejection or resistance, because those are all signs that God's at work. And that's honestly where God's going to get the glory and the power. Because if not, I tend to start celebrating all that I'm doing and look at me and sharp I am, and it's totally anti-gospel. And so I probably I think I already took my extra 5 minutes, to be honest with you, Chad, but if I had 5 minutes, I think I would have been just leaning into all the things that we could celebrate that we don't ever celebrate, which would be all the difficulties of life. That really is the sign of a mature believer. And it's also that annoying believer. You're like, how you doing? Oh, it's a tough time, but I'm thanking God. But you're like, but actually there's something really powerful and potent about it. And so that's probably where I would have landed a little bit more.
Wow. That's so powerful. I love that too, Pastor Rich, just the progression, how you started off, Paul's progression in Corinthians 11 and 12. I love that so much. I think it's so real, so relatable as well. And for those that are on here with us today, like, go ahead, share a takeaway that you have that maybe like impacted you, something that really ministered to you as well. We want to see in the chat. I love that. What was one of those takeaways for you, Colleen?
Well, I mean, I think one of my biggest takeaways, Pastor Rich, was even you talking about prayer and using your son as an example of like the ice cream scenario. And I think for me personally, I tend to have a pretty short shelf life on my prayers if I don't feel like God's answering them. And I think your message really just encouraged me and inspired me to be like, I have to keep asking and keep bringing the things that I feel like I need God to do in my life, like back to him over and over and over again. Because to me, I'm like, it's just like, it's easier to just give up hope on it.
Yeah.
So.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really, really kind of just interesting about us as believers is that God is always actually working. It's just so many of us kind of go through life and we sort of stop giving him credit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had crew on Monday night, which is E-group for you guys. And we were discussing a message from Sunday that actually I didn't preach, but we were actually talking about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And the message really had a challenge to go and, let's go wash feet, which I think is totally the right application. But many times people will skip right to that application, but they will miss out on the very first point of that text, which is Jesus first washes our feet, meaning that before we can serve, we have to be served.
Wow.
And we are saved to serve. And I think what happens is we kind of all like think about salvation or an encounter with Jesus as like this one moment, this thing that happened when I was 17 or when I was 18 or 3 years ago. But in all reality, Jesus doesn't just wash your feet one time. He continues to progressively show you his grace and meet your needs. I think when it comes to prayer requests, it's like, yeah, we all know that point that we're supposed to keep praying, but oftentimes we get tired or we get fatigued.
Right.
And we think that God honestly has something better to do than to keep meeting our needs. But what's funny is that he's meeting our needs right this moment. And either we decide to connect those dots and celebrate him and give him credit where credit's due, or we miss out on worshiping him and magnifying him. I think a lot of believers, they kind of get stale, including me. When I say this, like it's easy to do the whole lot of people, but me, like I think I miss out many times on giving God credit for where he is meeting my needs.
That's great.
For where he is blessing me, where he is answering me.
Love it.
Sometimes when, I don't know if this has ever happened, but like sometimes you're preaching a point, and as I'm preaching a point, I'm like, this point's like kind of true, and then it's like kind of not. Like I think I said unanswered prayers are not unmet needs, and I was like, God answers all of our prayers. Right. He just doesn't always answer them the way we want him to answer it. So,
Right.
If you watch that message, you'll see like 7 minutes into it, I'm like, he just didn't answer it the way you want. Like I'm trying to.
You got it.
But it's like he actually answers yes.
Right.
Oh, not right now.
Yeah.
So we got to learn that.
I love your perspective that you brought on how the grace of God is what it was that lets us not know what the thorn is.
Yeah.
For Paul, like, you always hear, man, we don't really know what it was, but knowing that there's this like theme of God's grace woven all throughout Scripture, and that's really God helping to not let us compare ourselves. Like you said, you kind of gave both sides of it. But then I started thinking like, that's cool, like that God didn't do that, but I feel like we face it every day with the world showing us what our thorn is or isn't, or you should be this or you shouldn't be that. Right. Or it's like, hey, that's a thorn, that's a thorn, that's a thorn, or why are you like that? You shouldn't be like that, you should be like this. We have the whole celebrity culture that's very, prominent, and it's like, oh man, I want to be like that, but I feel like what do you do, Pastor Rich, to help kind of go against that? You know what I mean? Like, it's just this whole culture that is in front of us. How would you encourage, I would say there's a lot of people who are joining, but I would just even ask this for myself.
Yeah.
Knowing thorns that I have, how do I not compare myself constantly? Maybe not to Paul, because I don't know what Paul's thorn is, but to everybody else to be like, oh, I think I'm a little bit better than that guy.
Right.
But, you know what I'm saying? It's just a tough thing to live out.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if we did know Paul's, and like, what if Paul's thorn was, he just didn't study the scriptures enough?
Oh God, help us.
The worst.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it is so merciful that we don't know Paul's thorn, because that's what human nature does, and that's what we do, is what we would compare, and then we would compete, and then we would, probably step into more calamity. There's all my 3 C's. I feel like what you're saying is like, we could get onto this discussion every week and just lean into this point, because I think it's an ongoing conversation. And I always think the first step when it comes to this is to recognize and expose your weakness. Hey, I have a tendency to compare myself to people. Now, I don't think you need to get up and use the platform in the pulpit to confess all of your thorns and weaknesses, but we certainly, that's what I was kind of saying in the message. It was like, we have to have safe places that we can share our secrets. And maybe that's it right there. Maybe my thorn is a major insecurity that I don't think I measure up to anybody else around me.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of like, that's sort of uncomfortable to say that out loud, or that's kind of embarrassing, or I feel shame with it. But as soon as we bring things to the light like that and expose it, that's the first step of healing, because what the enemy wants to do over and over again is use shame and keep you quiet and make you think that you can willpower your way through it. And so I'm strong enough, I just need to stuff this down. But it's actually in bringing it to the light and having a safe place to talk about it. And so in the specific area of comparison, because we did talk about that in the message as well, I really think that's an ongoing conversation. I think in different seasons of my life, I'm doing better than others.
Right.
I think as I get older, I've learned some of my triggers. That's a big part of healing and a big part of probably staying healthy, which is to kind of name your triggers and things that get you going. I can get extremely busy. This little thing right here, also known as the devil, my phone. I have to like, it's funny, we do like 21 days of prayer and fasting twice a year, and I'm like, I'm off Instagram. Everyone's like, you're weak. I'm like, I know.
I know.
You know, like I think things like social media. We also live in this day and age, right, where like there's a scoreboard in front of you. There's metrics for everything, and it's
right.
I know we got to measure stuff to manage it, but could it be true that, man, we don't always control the results? And if you live your whole life trying to control the results, you're going to recognize it's an uncontrollable number. It's an uncontrollable measuring stick. And so what are the things that you can control? What are the things you can focus on? And once again, I'm sure that most of your audience today listening probably knows that stuff. It's kind of like sunblock. You can have it in your drawer.
Right.
And just because you have it in your drawer doesn't mean you're not going to get burned. You actually have to apply it. And so many things for me are the application. And so comparison, there's some dirty tricks that the enemy has. I think me looking all day at your life doesn't ever make me enjoy my life anymore. So putting boundaries on things like social media, having safe places to talk, coming up with other things even on our team that we're trying to celebrate and make a big deal about, sort of trying to deconstruct some of the things of society that tries to get us to buy into, which would be celebrity culture, right? How you look and how you appear and what other people are saying about you. That's not everything, you know? How's my family? How's my health? Defining areas that I am growing. Because, you know, I've learned that there can be areas that maybe my career can look like it's going down per se, but my character is going up. Who's winning now?
Right.
You know? So like we've got to try to figure out the right people around us, and including ourselves, of what we're going to celebrate. What you celebrate, you repeat. So that's a big deal.
That's great. I love that. Pastor Rich, on the topic of comparison, I loved when you talked about Louis Giglio and how I wanted to be like Louis Giglio. And it really made me think about, like, we all have a Louis Giglio, right? And I know that you're probably a Louis Giglio for a lot of people, Pastor Rich as well. The part that I struggle with sometimes when it comes to comparison is, how do I still allow myself to maybe be influenced and inspired by certain people while still having like this awareness of like, no, I'm still me.
That's
like
great.
I'm still like, I still have grace to be me. And you spoke a little bit about the grace space. And so how do you balance that? How do you because God puts people in our lives, you know, to mentor us, to guide us, to lead us. How do you do that while at the same time remaining, still be you? Yeah,
I think so many things about God, the reason why we all are drawn to metaphor is because metaphor creates a story and it creates a lot of breathing room. Like, God is so much bigger than we know, like our mind, even like our human brain. And there's so many things in the scripture that require interpretation. And so a lot of ways that God is best explained is through story or illustration or metaphor, because it gives breathing room and it lets the listener kind of hear things and lean into a nuance of what's connecting with them. And so in this case right now, when it comes to this idea of like, how do I know where I'm at, like on the comparison thing, I think there's a lot of nuance to it, which is the metaphor that I lean into and I use it. I use it in a lot of my messages. And so I could use it over and over again, but I kind of started this message about the idea of like the FedEx package. Like, it's been purchased, I own it, I just don't have it in my possession yet. It's in transit, it's in process. And for me, I use that language over and over again. I'm in process, I'm becoming, I'm not perfect, I'm in progress, it's about progress. Like, a lot of what I preach about and teach about kind of comes back to these big threads. And I think it kind of also helps answer the question that we're coming around right here, which is, we got to be gracious towards ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that if we're not careful, we're always just a constant reaction. So I think it's actually beautiful. Like I could preach another message about how many sermons I preached of Louis Giglio that really helped a lot of people and really helped me learn somewhat of where I'm at on my journey as a communicator. And so I actually believe as communicators, and that's, I'll kind of lean into that because that's what I do sometimes. It's like, you got to be an echo before you become a voice. Like, I think there's this other reaction where it's like, oh, I'm nothing like Steven Furtick. Well, it's like, well, bro, you've listened to him quite a bit, no matter what, he's in you. You know what I mean? So like, don't be afraid to recognize that, and don't be afraid to stand in that for some period of time. Yeah. I think a lot of my life, I can hear all of my mentors in even today. Like, I still have Judah Smith deeply in me. I still have my dad deeply in me. I still have things that Pastor Steven does. And rather than like deny that once again and be like, oh man, you ain't ever seen nobody like Rich. It's not true. Like they're all in me. I think the journey is defining what is my voice and not being afraid to lean into the threads that are me. And I think that you ask the question and your answer's in it. Like, how do I balance that? Yeah. I don't know. I think that when you're on that tightrope, you got to know which way you're leaning towards. Yeah. I think when you're selling yourself out. I think when you're going, I'm a carbon copy. That was the illustration to me. Was I was like, I was in a context trying to do Louis Giglio. It's like, bro, you have to find out who you are in this journey. Yeah. And the blessing is not on me being somebody else. The blessing's on me being me. And so I wish I could tell you that like I am 100% authentically me all the time, but it's not true. At 37 years of age, I think I'm the most me I've ever been. Yeah. But I'm still in process in that. I'm still finding, I think, even my voice after all the countless hours I've done doing this, preaching and teaching. I'm still tapping into what makes me me.
Wow. It's powerful.
Really good.
I love the in transit metaphor there, because I really feel like, we hear messages all the time, and sometimes, it can feel like, man, it just sounds so simple, but it's not that simple. And I think the idea of in transit is it's not simple. That's the whole point. This stuff is so hard. Yeah. And it's like you deal with it day in and day out. And what you had said a few minutes ago, Pastor Rich, was, you gotta really focus on the things that you can control. And I think there's so much power in that, because so much of our lives, I really believe, are on things that are so much out of my control. If you were talking for nobody else, you were speaking right to me when you were saying you're trying to like measure everything and the number. I mean, that's my game. Like, that's what I do. I'm like, is that effect? Well, look at the numbers. And it's like, not that that's not important, but my goodness, when my identity becomes wrapped up in how successful something is or isn't, man, that's a thorn in my side. Yeah. And so it's just really relying on the strength of God. I loved when you finished out the message talking about your son going into the hospital room and him saying, I can't even do it justice, because when you did, I was listening again last night and I'm like crying at my house. I don't know, maybe you seem to get a little teary-eyed there too when you're talking about your son and like heading back and, Dad, if you're strong, I'm strong. I love that, because it's not relying on me, it's really relying on the grace of God in my life.
Right.
Love it.
So beautiful. I have a video of him doing it. I should have played the video. But I'll start crying talking about my son at 9:20 on a Wednesday morning. The Spirit of God. To me, it's like, and we have 3 little kids, and so I think every time I come to Elevation, you probably hear news stories about my kids, because it's the only material I have right now. But it's some of the best. And this is what, once again, answer the question. It's like, this is where I'm at in my life right now, and so God speaks to me all the time through my kids, and my boy in that moment is not strong. He's scared. He's afraid. But he has his dad going, are you strong? It's like, well, if you are, Dad. And once again, that's metaphor. That's illustration of going, oh, wait, that is how I'm supposed to be with my Heavenly Father. No, I'm not strong. I'm done telling you that I am. I'm really afraid. I'm scared. It's a Wednesday. I got to go into this. And I feel like I'm failing here. And I feel like I'm not measured up there. But God, if you are who you said that you are, and you're carrying me, like I'll keep going with you. I'll keep walking with you. And that, to me, that picture is enough for me today. You know what I mean? And I think that we have to go back to this. Like, I'm growing, I'm becoming, I'm on this journey. Let me lean into God right now in this moment and find strength in him. And that's why it makes us emotional, because it connects to us and it hits a felt need inside of us that goes beyond goosebumps in a church service. It's like it's the truth of God. It's who he is, that we can find strength in him. And this is what I'm banking my life on, you know? So it's like, it's not just some good preaching point. It's like, this is what I do every day. And I feel weak like you do. And I think most people, when they're being honest, and that's the beautiful thing about what Elevation Church does, or what our churches do, is it creates a moment for us to go, yeah, I struggle. I am struggling, but it's not stopping me from becoming the person that God's called me to be. And so I'm not giving up. I'm not quitting. And that's about as much as we can ask out of anybody today. Don't quit. Don't give up. God's carrying you. He'll be with you.
I love it. Well, to wrap up, Sayward said, hey, stop on the YouTube over here, Jeremy. Sayward said, Pastor Rich, we thank you so abundantly for all you've done for the kingdom, how much you've done for your family. We're so proud of you. And there's so many comments here in the chat just thanking you for how God is using you and how you're a voice to so many people who are in need. Thank you for what you're doing in Miami, and thanks for coming and being here as a part. We appreciate you. We love you here. And just as we wrap up today, we could keep talking about this for a long time, but if you missed it, the message is available. If you've joined us and are like, what are we talking about here? What I missed? It's on YouTube, Elevation Church YouTube channel. Pastor Rich was with us this past weekend, preached an amazing message that you have to go and catch, and then you can watch this back as well.
That's right.
On Elevation Plus's channel. So real quick before we wrap up here, one or two quick things, Colleen.
We have
Elevation Nights.
Elevation Nights happening April 25th. 4th,
Close.
5th, somewhere in there, April 25th through somewhere at the beginning of March.
May 5th.
May. Yeah, really, you set me up well for that. It's gonna be awesome. ElevationNights.com. All the information's on there, but we are so excited to come meet you guys.
That's right. And then next weekend,
we're going to VA, Norfolk, Virginia.
That's right.
Can't wait for our next Elevation Church pop-up.
That's right.
We're still on the high from San Antonio, and so like I can't wait to bring that energy into Virginia. And after that, we're heading to Vegas. And so go to Elevation Church.
2 weeks later.
.online for more information on that. I'm pumped.
It's gonna be awesome.
it's going to be good. If you haven't pre-ordered or pre-added, not just the brand new album that releases next week from Elevation Worship, but also Pastor Rich's new book. If you joined late, again, one more time, Pastor Rich, give us the info on the book that people can grab.
Yeah, Single and Secure. You can get it at Amazon, of course, or intothe.night.com is our website where it's being sold. Of course, you can get it on Kindle and all that kind of stuff as well. But Single and Secure.
It's great.
We'll
drop another link in there just so you guys can access it easily.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of CoffeeFam. Thank you, Pastor Rich, for speaking and being a part and sharing some time and wisdom with us today. We love y'all. We will see you all soon. Make sure you join us this weekend. You don't want to miss it. We love you. Bye, fam.
Bye.